Thanks, Mike.
All right, so what should we be aware of? What sort of signs should we be looking at, especially during these times and dealing with cybercrime?
I think really one of the most important things is to realize that phishing and these kind of social engineering attacks are used by everybody, from the kind of very large nation state funded, advanced threat groups right the way through to everyday cyber criminals. And they piggyback on really any kind of trend or theme that's occurring. So one thing that we found at the start of the year, when various nations were going into lockdown, we had a huge increase in remote working, people working from home, and attackers that were sending out phishing emails were using the kind of theme of COVID-19, the pandemic, and coronavirus to brand and kind of personalize their emails in the phishing scams to try and trick victims into clicking on links and installing malware. Right. So really one of the big things to be aware of is to just understand that attackers are going to be using any kind of big theme or trend that's occurring.
Just give us a sense of what you're picking up in trends and how sophisticated these criminals are getting. Give us some of the examples.
Sure. So we found for the second year running that it's really probably no surprise that some of the big brands are the most often impersonated when it comes to phishing scams. People like Amazon, large delivery firms such as DHL, large kind of global banking firms, they're typically the ones that get used to try and trick victims into clicking on links. So as well as copying these brands, using logos, making their emails look genuine, they'll also go and create the websites to actually lure the victim in and to try and steal their credentials. And when they're doing that, I think one of the things that's very, very tricky for us as, cybersecurity experts, or we like to think we are, and we try to educate the consumers and educate businesses. For a long time, we've been saying, look at the address bar of the website that you're visiting. Look at the padlock. Look for that padlock. Look for that secure connection. And what we found is over the past few years, more and more attackers and phishers are using that padlock. They're using encryption to make their website seem really genuine, thereby kind of, implying this false sense of trust and security to their victims. So we can't, unfortunately, say anymore, look for that padlock and you're going to be safe. Yeah. Really, what you need to do is look at, very, very detailed look at the address bar and make sure you're visiting the website that you're actually expecting to go to.
Right. So these spoofed websites are a big concern. Are you getting a sense that authorities are on top of their game and trying to put paid to these so-called websites?
Certainly the various data protection authorities around the world are very aware of the trends. We've seen reports from the likes of Europol, reports from Australia and America that all indicate that phishing is by far the number one threat posed to not only businesses, but consumers as well. So although the data protection authorities are aware of it, actually doing something about it is a little bit more difficult. And this is really just because of the way the web has grown organically over the decades. And for example, legitimate businesses will use dozens or hundreds of different domain names in their kind of day-to-day activities. So a bank might use a valid website address such as yourbank.com, but they might go and use a third party to go and send emails on their behalf. So it's making it very, very difficult for your average kind of everyday consumer to really recognize what is a genuine email and where should it be coming from.
Right. So once you realize that you've been scammed, is there anything that you can do at that point to fix the situation immediately?
Well, I think one thing that's actually been highlighted in our kind of recent research and studies is that attackers are getting much quicker at turning around and using your stolen credentials or credit card details. We've seen attacks occur in as little as 4 hours. And in some cases, the attacks are actually happening in real time. So the attackers are sitting on their fraudulent website so that when you enter your credit card details, they're being used immediately to conduct fraudulent transactions. So really, time is of the essence. As soon as you think you might have entered either credentials, passwords, personal details, or payment card details into a fraudulent site, you really do need to contact not just your payment card holder and provider, but also the legitimate website that you believe you are visiting. Clearly one of the bits of advice that we can give is use Most countries, credit card companies will offer some level of protection against online fraud. But contacting banks and contacting the legitimate companies wherever possible is definitely recommended.
Is the rule you go by, David, if it's too good to be true, it probably is?
Yes, I would say that's probably quite true.
Yeah.
There are some indicators that, as a cybersecurity expert, you can look for on websites to determine if it's malicious or not. But again, that's becoming increasingly difficult. So it's very, very tempting to go for the best offer, particularly ones that do look too good to be true.
Yeah.
But particularly in this kind of busy shopping periods, or any time there's any kind of incidents that attackers might kind of piggyback onto, it really does pay to kind of go to your trusted supplier, someone that you've used time and time again. And again, do not click on links and emails wherever possible. Open up your web browser and enter the address yourself manually to be sure that you're going to the right site.
Just be vigilant, folks. Be vigilant, especially during this time. David, we thank you very much indeed for your insight and perspective. Be well.
Thank you.
All right, that was malware specialist David Warburton there, giving us some salient advice ahead of Black Friday as well as the festive season. Well, the